Okay, evening. Once again, this clip probably isn't going to make any sense. I started making a clip and it stopped halfway through, so whether or not it saved that or not, because I'm yet to have a look on the card. So you might have just watched that. If not, anyway, we're back. Cheap Chinese battery off eBay. Hopefully, maybe this camera will actually keep operating for more than 30 seconds at a time. So you can see, obviously, the car's up in the air now. The engine's out. I can't remember where we were at, but the engine is now completely torn apart. That's right, this is what I was going to record. I was going to put it on a time lapse while I took the engine apart, and it wouldn't work, and I had an evening and I wanted to get it apart, so I'm afraid I didn't capture that on video, but it was pretty boring anyway. I mean, I've just completely disassembled the engine. The rods and pistons are out of it and everything's all over the floor in a big mess. So that's completely disassembled. The head looks in great shape, which is great because obviously I'm going to reuse that. So you won't be able to reuse that block, because when I built this engine originally, because of the shorter rods, I was trying to compensate and trying to get the compression back a bit closer to where it needed to be, so I decked the top of that block hard. So obviously now if I put standard length rods back in this engine, the pistons are going to be sitting too high. So annoyingly we're going to have to start with another block, which I've got plenty of, but it's a bit of a pain, because obviously this one I had all the machine work done on it and cleaned it all up, and it's kind of good to go. But anyway, that's junk. I'll keep the crank and all that a bit. We'll basically transplant everything from that block into the new block, but with the correct length rods. And the rest of it will go back together exactly the same. We are going to be running different pistons this time, a slightly new design piston. And obviously the injectors will actually change as well, just because they require a different angle. So that will be to come in the not too distant future. As you can see, everything just needs a serious clean-up. It's pretty disgusting, to be fair, but I'm just kind of ignoring the engine for a minute now. It's apart, and I thought we'll try and get the car, at least underneath and stuff, all sorted out, so it's not yet another issue to deal with. So obviously got the engine out. I'm planning to drop the subframe off, the fuel tank and the rear axle, to pull the side skirts off it, because I want to clean it front to back, completely clean it up, do any welding that's needed, sort any dodgy areas out and stuff, remove all the stuff that's on there at the moment, because anyone that deals with Peugeots will know they're actually generally, well, in my experience, they're generally very, very good for rust compared to other stuff. So what they use from the factory is like a really thick underseal. It's yellow stuff you can see, and in all fairness, it does a very good job. And you have to remember, these cars are sort of 25, 30-year-old now, and until now this car hasn't had any welding done on it. And it's been down in Cornwall, obviously, parked up for a lot of its life, which is not ideal. But what the problem is, when they do get a bit older, it will eventually start to crack, and you'll find the moisture will then get between that and the body. And what can actually often happen is it kind of looks immaculate on the outside, but underneath you can have quite a problem going on. Now, the 306s generally suffer in the outriggers at the front and those bottom frame rails there. And then sometimes running up the chassis leg there as well. And sometimes you can get some issues just in the front of the wings in the bottom where the water sits. But it's these two outriggers, that's the worst area from my experience. That's where I've done a lot of welding over the years on 306s. And in all fairness, I think in a lot of the time that is caused by, well, it's not caused, but it's not helped by people jacking them up in the wrong place. And it then, because these outriggers are just a piece of tin, they very, very quickly deform and bend, and as soon as you do that, it cracks all the underseal, the moisture gets in them and they start to rot. So I think that kind of starts it going, I think, in a lot of cases, and then obviously it just gets worse from there. It's actually a pretty easy repair, to be fair, if the only issue is the outrigger. It's just spot welds pretty much all the way around. It then laps over the top of the main frame rail and actually wraps in under. Now, the piece under here can also sometimes get pretty thin. In this case, not too bad. And obviously, if it's left get bad enough, and the rot gets bad enough, it will take this frame rail out. So I probably should have said before, as you can see, I've already cut the outriggers out of this. I've just made a start on this evening. They weren't actually too horrendous, but they were just starting to get thin. You can tell there's pinholes in them and stuff. And really, when they get like that, it's easier just to cut the whole thing out and start again than to start trying to patch it up. If you start trying to patch it up, you'll find that the metal is like tin foil, and you just end up making a massive mess, and it's quite difficult to actually do. And it's generally easier to just chop it out and start again, and then you know the whole thing is solid. But like I was saying, if they get bad, they'll end up rotting in the bottom of the frame rail. But you can see these are absolutely solid. The other problem you'll get is obviously on the sill over here. They can rot here, and also any of the models that have the side skirts on them, these should be bolted up so they're touching. But what happens is the mud builds up in here, and obviously the sun never gets to it, and it just sits damp against the actual sill on the car, and they will rot through from the outside there. But once the moisture gets into the sill, it will then sit in the bottom. It will rot the bottom of the inner sill out, and if it gets really bad, it then gets into the floor pan of the car. I don't think we've got any problems under these, only because it wasn't that long ago, obviously, when I painted it, that those skirts were off. And being a phase 1, this didn't have side skirts on it originally, because it was just a D-turbo. So it's actually spent most of its life without side skirts on it, and since it's had them on it, it hasn't done that many miles, if you see what I mean. But we could have surprises. I haven't taken them off yet, so there could be anything going on under there. So yeah, anyway, I've cut these outriggers out. I've just gone back to where it's clean metal. This one here was a little bit dodgy or a bit thin up against there, so I've chopped that out as well. The main thing is just get back to clean metal. As you can see, everything... Sorry, I'm turning you upside down. Everything inside is still brand new, which is great. The rust hasn't, and the moisture hasn't got in there too bad and done more damage. They tend to rot here as well, so you've got your inner splash guard and inner wheel spat, and again the mud sits behind the spat and sits between the spat and the car, and the same problem happens. The moisture sits there and eventually rots through, which is what's happened on this side. So you can see I've also cut out quite a bit of steel on this side. Same in here, it was getting a bit thin. I've cut the whole outrigger out, but in this case it was getting thin in this area. In fact, there was a lot of holes in that area. So that skin comes up to where my hand is there, comes across and is folded against that lip there. If you're real careful with the drill, you can just drill all the spot welds out, and that whole thing will literally just peel off. I may end up cutting this out completely, to be quite honest, and just redoing all of it, because it'll actually be easier to cut a plate right in through than to try and patch that in, but I haven't really decided yet. So what I've done at the minute is just leave all the good metal and cut out all the bad, and then we can make an assessment from there. What I am noticing in this one is a little bit of thin metal here at the top of the sill there, which is sometimes an indication that we've got a problem on the inside. So I think probably one of the next steps is going to pull these side skirts off and just be sure we haven't got more problems there. I've had to weld up quite a few of them over the years as well, so that's always a possibility. Hopefully that doesn't turn into a whole world of welding, because these jobs, once you start cutting them open, tend to just escalate and take up quite a lot of time. So I'm hoping this is going to be hopefully most of the welding it is doing. Again, the frame on this side is rock solid. Now this inner plate here is not brilliant. It's there, it could be welded back there and it would be largely fine, but I can see looking up there it's getting thin. So once you can't really get to any of that in situ until the subframe's out. So I want to get the subframe out and everything at some point in the next couple of weeks, but I want the car to remain rollable for the time being, otherwise it's going to be stuck on this lift. So at the minute I'm just doing what I can get to in situ, and then when we put it back on here eventually I'm going to strip all this down, I'll replace that, and then I think the plan is going to be, you can see I've just gone around and stripped everywhere where there's a seam. Basically it's actually in perfect condition under here, just starting to get a little bit of surface rust. In this area here again is dodgy, that's that plate I was talking about that comes through and overlaps the frame. Wherever you've got the different layers of metal basically meeting each other, that's where there's a real potential for moisture to get between the steel layers, and that's where the rot tends to start. So as well as underneath the car, I want to get right up in all the arches, front and back. So obviously all the 306 people will be fully aware that another very common issue on the 306 is in the arch at the rear. Generally only noticed when it goes through the arch and you start getting water on the inside of the car. I'm fairly sure this one's pretty solid because obviously there's no interior in it and it looks perfect from the inside, but we could have the starts of some rust etc this side, so we want to get up in there and clean all that up and then put a good layer of protection on it to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. Again, same in the front arches. They seem to be pretty good, but you can see where I've just scraped a few areas back where I could see this stuff was cracking and we got a bit of surface rust going on, and there is a small hole I found up here. Again, it's another flat area where mud sits, so I have to put a small patch over that. That's quite an easy one. And again, it's just going to be clean all this up. Obviously all the suspension will be gone. There's endless, not so much this side, but there's a huge amount of non-original wiring that you can see I've obviously run in there back in the day. Safe to say my standards back then were not the same as they are now, and all of this menagerie is definitely going to have to come out of here and be redone. I'm not really sure what any of it is because I can't remember. It's probably stuff that was running after the matter that I didn't think about, or possibly chassis stuff like the power steering and for radiator fans maybe, I don't really know, but either way all of that needs to be tidied up and put into conduit and removed because it's probably not necessary. And when we got it off, I'll obviously clean the tank up, but we have all these tent brackets shot blasted. The axle's getting a bit crusty. It's obviously absolutely fine. I completely rebuilt this in the original series, all bearings and seals, and that was actually long enough ago where you could actually buy the original, in my opinion, higher quality bearings still from Peugeot to do it. So the beam is actually mechanically absolutely sweet, but it just wants a bit of a shot blast and a tidy up really. So I'll probably just end up replacing all the brake lines front to back and all four corners, just because when you've got everything off like this and the engine out, it's so easy to do, it's almost stupid not to. I'll probably be doing that at some point. I have to move these fuel lines out the way, go through the brakes. Obviously the wheels are absolutely horrendous as well from just sitting, steel wheels, classic. Paint them whatever colour you like and do the best job you can, they always go rusty. You can never seem to keep it out of the inner lip there. Just recording this clip after the matter, hopefully I'll be able to squeeze it somewhere in the video. But we were talking about jacking points and people jacking them in the wrong place. This is largely irrelevant now considering the number of 306s that are actually on the road, and most of them are owned by people that definitely know what they're doing. But anyway, when you jack these things up, there's a piece of the sill that sits lower than all the rest of it. And you can see at the end of my finger there, it's got a bit of paint on it. That section that protrudes down lower is a much thicker piece of steel, and if you've ever taken one of these apart or done much welding on the sills, you'll know that that piece of steel goes right up through and ties into the side of the car. That is where you're supposed to jack it from. That piece of steel is really strong and more than capable of lifting the car. Not this thing here under the floorboards, not the outrigger here, or frankly anywhere else. Although in fairness, these hoops, which I believe were used to dip the cars originally in the factory, they are actually pretty strong, and I'm not going to lie, you can jack the car up. Jacking it from pretty much anywhere else will result in bending the metal. Push comes to shove, you can jack it from under the frame rail, but you want to try and make sure you've got a jack that is flat, not with the protruding end, because if all your jacking force goes under a small area on the edge of your trolley jack, for example, that will still bend that. And again, if this is all still covered in factory understeel, if you go in there and start jacking it, you will damage that understeel, and the moisture will get in there and it will start to rot. And that pretty much goes for anywhere. If you jack it from anywhere other than there, you will basically end up damaging something and causing yourself more problems down the line. And I appreciate by this time these cars are 25, 30 year old. And most of that damage has already been done by someone else. So really the next steps is just to get the car torn apart more stripping, more cleaning, and eventually painting. And then once the car is something like it, we'll move on to building the new engine, which will largely be the same as the old engine, as I explained earlier. It's just a slight difference in the short block and the pistons. So we'll put all that back together again. And then I've got plans, I think. I haven't really decided yet. I'm still debating exactly what we're going to do, but the turbo combination stroke turbo setup is going to change. As interesting as that setup is, there is not a lot of room in a 306 chassis for twin turbos and everything else with a 16 valve engine in the first place, and everything that we've got going on here. And it's a real nightmare to get your hands around and work on. So if you do get a problem, it's just a complete pain in the neck, and it does not really encourage you to work on it. So I'd really like to simplify things, make maintenance and the ability to work on it a priority. So hopefully we can improve that. But for now, the priority will be to get the underside of the car sorted, and the suspension and the brakes, all the boring, annoying stuff that you don't want to be doing, basically. We're going to get that all knocked out at the start, so we know it's good to go, and then we're going to move on to the engine. Hopefully these clips will all come together and make some form of sense, and I imagine the next clip will be probably starting to tear this car apart even more, and hopefully the GoPro is now going to be working well enough that we can actually start filming again. So hopefully we've still got some people following along that are actually interested. I feel like it would be quite interesting to know how many people are watching this video that have watched or were watching back in the day the videos of the original engine builds, should I say, or at least the latest incarnation of this car. So if you did used to watch those videos and you're still watching this now, maybe leave a comment down in the bottom. I'd find it really interesting to know how many people that always used to watch are still watching. So obviously there's been a massive gap in videos, and it's pretty interesting the way YouTube obviously promotes videos and works with its algorithm and stuff these days, because back in the day a video with the same number of subscribers would obtain obviously vastly more views. So it'd be interesting to see how many people do still see this video that would have been watching them back in the day. Hopefully this is still somewhat relevant, and I hope as we get a bit deeper into the build, things will get a bit more interesting. But either way, thanks for watching. I do genuinely appreciate it.